Hello and welcome to episode one of the inaugural Fallen Show. And I just really like that word, and that's all I'm gonna say.
I just love the fact that it's a perfect example of our ability to just make shit up. And after a long enough time, it becomes familiar. And then people actually just start using the term. And then you forget that you made it up at one point. So that said, enjoy the Quallen Show. So today's episode, as we had previously mentioned, is now not just a call-in show, but also a Q&A episode. This is something that we're hoping to do more often because there have been quite a few questions that come up, and admittedly, not all of the questions are involved enough or require a long enough answer to put a whole episode into or to cover in a community topics. We do have actually a couple of suggestions up for the next community topics episode that I'm really looking forward to see whether or not they get voted up. So anybody who hasn't participated in our community topics vote, go check out the community topics channel on our Discord and then vote on Patreon once we put the poll up. But aside from that, I guess what I was saying to start with this is that we want to engage more with the audience because all of you really do drive the show, and the questions that you ask and the points that you make really are helpful to everybody else who is listening. This is something I've said to numerous people in our groups. You may not think that you asking a question or just working through something on an episode or in a video chat is useful. You may think it has no value, but somebody in that is listening to you. Somebody there is making the most out of what you are saying. And the same is true here and now. The same is true in this call-in show right now. So that said, don't make that assumption. You're always adding something. And so as a result, we have decided to integrate a Q&A episode and a call-in episode. So when you're not calling in, we're going to be answering questions and giving probably unsatisfying answers that lead to more questions. But if you're not calling in, we're going to be filling the space with more of how you're engaging with us, with more of what you would like to hear. So from now on, please do submit questions on Discord before these episodes. It's going to be every second Tuesday. Or if you're on Patreon, we're going to post something asking you for your questions before the episode, just as we did today. So that all said, I'm going to pass this over to Andrew, and then I'm going to go and look up what kind of questions that we've got. Appreciate you all being here, and very shortly we're going to submit the link there that you can call in and join us live.
Yeah, that just hit me pretty hard. Like you never really know what someone's gonna take from something that you do or say. Like this just reminded me of this morning. This morning I posted a little like morning routine vlog, kicked it off ripping ass. And it was a good one too. It was like a good 3 seconds or so. And when I was, it was funny because like, and I might make a video. I'm gonna start doing more just shit, like just random clips and then talking over it, not even explaining what's happening, just saying some shit, saying some words, whatever comes to mind. But like when I was doing that, because I was gonna film like a morning routine thing, and then as I was rolling out, I ripped ass, and it was as I said, it was a good one. I mean, it's on there, it's out there, so you can hear it. Just how good of a one it was, just real solid. Not a squeaker, not a wet one, just real solid. Anyway, I don't have to get too deep into all the variations of the different types of farts that my butthole can create, but it was funny because when that happened, I was like, then the idea hit me of like, oh, that would be a funny way to kick this off. And then all the thoughts about like, where I would go with that, and how just talking about how it's interesting how there's such an aversion to something like that. Why is that the case? Like, why do we have an aversion if it is the scent? Why do we have an aversion to the sound that it makes? And I went on and on and on about, the ways that the things that we hold on to, normalcy being a myth, like trying to to do things to not be ourselves. Now I'm like, can't even remember what the fuck I even necessarily talked about in the video, because that wasn't the point that I was trying to make here. And I was going to say here, my point was that afterwards, I like had a flood of like, that was a crazy thing to do. And it was funny because I didn't even laugh because it was such a thing that I was like, yeah, this makes sense. Because it doesn't make sense that we have such an aversion to it. But then it was hitting me like, whoa, I started judging myself for a thing that I did in a moment. It was almost like in a moment of clarity, and because there wasn't I wasn't even laughing during my voiceover, and I was like, how the fuck was I just fucking started off the video farting and like wasn't even laughing about the points I was making because it was a valid point. I think there was a lot of validity to what I was saying, but then there was myself sort of not even realizing the humor in it. And so it was hitting me after, like, that was a crazy thing. That was kind of a wild thing to do. And then I was even judging myself for like not like taking it kind of seriously and the point seriously, but it was in a sense there is can be some seriousness to the point. But so anyway, it was just hitting me how much when you are letting yourself be yourself and just whatever happens, it's like you don't feel necessarily like you're in control so much anymore. And a big part, I was going to say a big part, the whole part essentially is like letting go of your own judgments about yourself, about how you act when you are a little bit less filtered, when you are just willing to jump in, be yourself, kind of have that sort of free flow is so much of our, built up tension and aversion is to us being ourselves, like actually being ourselves. And so our hesitation is like our own judgments about ourselves. So as those start to fall away, then as we'll start acting like more like ourselves, and then we'll be shown all of the reasons that we would tense up, all the reasons that we judged ourselves for the things that we do and the ways that we act. And you see it reflected maybe in society, in the world, but it is ridiculous. It's ridiculous for yourself to expect yourself to act differently than just being yourself, and it's also ridiculous to expect someone else to cater to your own preferences of how to act. And it's just fascinating how we'll hold on to those like something shouldn't be happening other than how it is, other than what I am, just showing up, being me right now. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm seeing more and more just how much is uncertain and like you can't be sure of anything ever. And if there's an aversion to that, there's going to be, I'm going to try and figure it out before it happens, but I can't do that. I can only show up as myself. And like, if I'm trying to be something else when I show up, and then it's going to create a lot of conflict. And so there's all these things that maybe I'm afraid of ways of acting showing up, even like I've talked about before, just like not having anything to say, forgetting what I'm going to say, you know, forgetting in mid sentence what the fuck I'm even talking about, which I laugh about now, but it's still something in there because like I'll do that all the time. You're like, I don't even know what I'm talking about, and laugh it off, and then life goes on. But there was a point in my life where that was like detrimental. Was something like that happening because I couldn't laugh at myself because I took myself very seriously and took myself more and more seriously, and so then there's almost that aversion to going back to certain things that cause you to feel that way. And so anyway, it's interesting that yeah, now I'm like, I don't know, I had there was a point there, something about judging yourself and not judging yourself so much and just being able to jump in, and all that good stuff. And it's like, what the fuck am I doing if I'm not allowing myself to just continue to jump in and show up, like expect myself to be different than I am? That's like, it's not possible. I'm going to show up as I am, but I'm going to, you know, get in the way of that. So yeah, I think the point was just like there was no point, but anything I expect myself to be or think I shouldn't be, like that's on the table. And then if that's on the table, then I can just keep showing up and being relaxed. But if it's off the table, then it's like there's going to be some tension. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, that's so funny. You have this fear of like not having anything to say, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I have a whole lot of thoughts about not having anything to say. And there's something there. It's just that you end up like a deer in the headlights. All of a sudden you're just like, and you're just staring at the problem instead of allowing yourself to move around it. Instead of actually having some mobility, you're just locked in, like, I don't know what to say. It's like you're not even breathing, right? And it's like, well, Yeah, you could say, I don't know what to say. Oh my goodness, you just said something. You know, and it's just that we get caught in it. We have a number of questions, and I thought this was really interesting because one of them just came through on the comment section, but another one was submitted on the Discord, and they kind of go together, in my opinion. And here's why. What are some cool ways that you guys have gotten outside of your comfort zones lately? And so I figured, as a real time answer to that question, I would throw in this next question and then throw it at Andrew to see what his answer is, because we're getting out of our comfort zones. I was just going through some of the comments on your TikTok, and I saw a question that hasn't been answered. They were talking to me at this point. But the question was, what is your take on the experience of people seeing, hearing, or being in the presence of quote unquote evil spirits? Example, poltergeists or ghosts, seeing things move unexplainably, the all-around topic of ghosts and hauntings, etc. How do people come to create that in their reality and or experience it? I'm very curious about this. And so I've had years to knock about with this one, but I'm curious as fuck where you're going to run with it.
I appreciate that a lot because I don't know where I'm going to run with this, but I thought it was funny because the first question after the ones that we answered yesterday on this Q&A was, do you believe in ghosts, spirits, gods, other dimensions, or just anything science can't explain? So, oh man, like specifically, so it's like with ghosts, basically. Like, what are your thoughts on ghosts? Was that I was like getting that?
More or
Okay,
less,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
does it happen? And if it does happen, how do you explain that shit happening?
It's also funny because like there's been points in the podcast where with Q&As, like I am I've like I don't even know what I'm gonna say at this point, but there have been points where with something like that, I kind of knew. I was like, oh yeah, I have a response to that. And it was kind of like I don't know. There was a number of times we've done Q&As and we've talked about, I think this specifically, and I have answered it. And it's just funny how there was almost more I feel like maybe even a year ago. I felt like right now that I had more almost certainty, but that was not being me. And that wasn't being me. And even like, you know, talking about that and mentioning that and going on this little tangent that I'm talking about right now, there may have been an aversion to that because I don't even really know what I'm saying right now. Just referring to a previous experience. And then yeah, and it's like there is more of a willingness to be just uncertain in general. And with that, you're not holding on so much to those mechanisms of control that you don't even realize that you're doing when you're doing them. So anyway, on to ghosts. This is me trying to just completely avoid the subject because I'm like, I still don't know what the fuck I'm gonna say. But so this is gonna be me working through it live. But
It's so funny. I just had
so
this image of like an old timey Western. It's like somebody's like shooting at your feet, dance, boy, dance. And it's just like, yeah, I'm doing the best I can, just going with it. Yeah.
like I'm staying alive here. I'm staying alive. No, anyway, so with ghosts and all of that, like what you're seeing right now is a projection to some degree, and it's like how willing you are to be sure that what you're seeing is what you're seeing. And there's points that all, relax a little bit more, be it on mushrooms, and you don't even need mushrooms, and stuff will start moving around and wobbling. And and so I almost wonder like how deep the tension goes about like what I'm holding on to. Very much so. This being what I think it is all the time. Like there's a lot kind of keeping things in a way that this is how I think it is. And what's going on right now is what I think is going on. And so all that to say, like our mind is very fucking powerful in a lot of ways. Like our ability to imagine something and then come up with some idea of what that is, or see something, or you even wonder. I was on a walk today and I saw like on the horizon that there was actually a big dip, like the earth went down a little bit because I could see very far, and I'd never really looked up to that point, above the tree line where I could see how far it went. It was always kind of at eye level, more or less, when I was looking around. Because even sometimes you don't even notice like at least for me. I'll be just like looking down at my feet or like a few feet in front of me. But as you start to relax a little bit more, you pick your head up a little bit more and you just start to see more of the world. It's not even like an interdimensional thing or anything like that, but it's just seeing the world for what it is when you're a little bit more relaxed. So if that's the case, if I can notice so much more, if I get very, very, honed into a specific perspective about something, then I can see other things too. And I wonder how far that can go in the way of certainty. Because even like the things that I'm like, the reality that I see, like there's no guarantee that anyone sees that the same way as I do. The way that I see someone, it's like that's, and if I'm holding on to some idea of them, that's my idea of them. And that's it. That's the end of that. Like there is no guarantee beyond them being my idea. And so I'm very much alone in my experience of whatever's going on. That said, like if all of this is energetic soup, and atoms are 99% empty space, then who's to say that there can't be a variation that only I see in my reality? If everything is just in my reality, like there isn't necessarily a guarantee one way or the other that someone can or can't see something else. So that's my long-winded way of saying that it could, everything's on the table when you're not holding on to being so sure of exactly what's going on right
That was a damn good answer. It was good. It was well rounded. You went through a bunch of different angles. You're like, there's this and this and this and this and this and this. And at the end of the day, we don't fucking know, which was perfect. I thought that was great. Um, the way that I've been thinking about this recently, and recently, I mean, in the last 15 minutes since we started talking about it, you know how people have conversations about quote unquote psychedelic entities when they're under the influence of ayahuasca or DMT? And they talk about these projections of their awareness, of their consciousness, that are essentially entities that are symbolizing certain parts within our awareness. And of course, people are like, oh, they're actual entities within universal consciousness, because we have this giant perspective of ourselves in something rather than everything being within consciousness, which is nowhere, right? This is the whole non-local universe thing. So the point is that in a psychedelic trip, likewise in a dream, everything and everyone that you're interacting with is a direct reflection of your mind, your mentality, and where you are in that spectrum. Right? If you are going to bed in a state of stress and worry and anxiety, you are likely going to have nightmares. Right? If you go into a psychedelic trip in a state of worry and stress and anxiety, you're likely going to have a bad trip. Right? But in those experiences, you are dealing with quote unquote entities. I don't think that we are any different. I don't think that quote unquote techno elves or angels or any of those things that you deal with on extremely psychedelic trips are really any different than every single person and every single plant and every single animal that you ever met. It's just that we don't understand the symbolism. Right? It's not so cut and dry. It's not so simplistic. But everybody that you've ever met is symbolic of something within your consciousness, within your mind, within the consciousness, within, you could say, well, I guess that's the problem, is when like within your mind, you start thinking about your body, and that has nothing to do with your mind, right? Your body is experienced through your mind. As much as you think that your mind is experienced as a result of your body, the fact is without your awareness, there would be no body. This is the paradox, is that you are experiencing the universe, but it only exists within your awareness, and it is impossible to determine which one is actually true, whether or not you are in a universe or the entire thing is within your consciousness. This is the solipsistic view that we were talking about the other day, that there's nothing but you. But when you take away the idea of you having ownership over yourself, like you, the personality, instead it's just you existence, it changes things. And this very much backs up what Andrew was saying previously in terms of everything's on the table. Because if this is all subjective reality, then there's nothing to say that other versions of reality can't come slipping in and out of it, and you know, it doesn't say that other things can't happen. It's not to say that there aren't whole versions or whole other aspects of reality happening that we aren't aware of. We know that just by our limited view of the light spectrum and the sound spectrum and everything else. Like there's just so much that we're just not taking in. Right? So that all said, though, I think the real question is it important? And immediately you're like, yeah, but it's cool, you know, but you know, these stories of ghosts is like, yeah, okay, and I get that, but let's just break it down. And again, I don't mean to shit on the party. It's just that you can spend a lot of time thinking about this otherworldly shit, and it really does take away from your life. So let's just break it down. Why do we care? Like, why does it matter? And if we go looking for evidence, you're not going to find any. And if you find any, it's some grainy video footage. Because if there was ever any proof that ghosts actually exist, that they're interacting with our world as a whole, we'd know. We would be fucking told. It would be all over the news, and it's because they are desperate for shit to tell us. So I don't know. I think that there are unexplained situations that people tend to explain through superstition. I think that um, there is a connection between our mind and our environment that we may not be prepared to accept, and so certain things that may happen as a result of that connection, we can't rationalize through cognitive dissonance. It's just it goes against how we see ourselves as separate. That said, I don't know what the spectrum of that is, but that's why we're a part of the Global Consciousness Project. Is they are trying to prove that there is in fact some connection between the observer and the observed, that there is an observable effect of our mentality on the randomness within our reality. Right? But if that's the case, that means there's also an observable effect of our consciousness on reality, which may also mean what frequencies we're tuned into. I mean, perhaps we're seeing something that's happening in a very similar reality, but not this one. So, I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions there, but it's a damn good question. It's a lot of fun. You can go through it quite a bit, but it definitely turns it on its ass when you start recognizing, like, you don't know if you're in the world or it's in you. Because then it's just like, okay, are they ghosts or are they just manifestations of ourselves? Like, are they just projections? Am I just dealing with something and I'm seeing it in a physical sense? So there's a lot of questions there, but that was a dope one. I appreciate the person who asked, and of course that one came from Discord. And what I like about that question is that it immediately makes me face my distaste for questions like that, because admittedly, I really don't like questions like that. I'm not one of those people who likes questions about the otherworldly stuff. I don't want to talk about, you know, the fifth dimension. I don't want to be talking about the battle between heaven and hell. I don't want to be talking about, you know, any of that shit. I really just don't. It's not that it's not interesting, it's that it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the real point, which is your awareness expanding now. And as much fun as it is to read fairy tales, and as much fun as it is to imagine what if, it is far more fucking fun to gain more awareness of who you are, where you are, what's happening right now. And by that, I mean just an unfolding state of awareness, not an actual answer. And so, and again, the questions are fine. We've answered lots of community topics on stuff like this, you know, like Freemasons. And I don't think we've covered aliens yet, have we? We might have covered aliens. I don't know. There's been some stuff where I'm just like, yeah, all right, let's get into it, you know, and it's just because it's interesting. It helps build a bigger perspective of your world. And it's stuff that you can kind of chew on in your spare time. But I would say it's stuff that you only chew on in your spare time. I would not say that this is stuff that's going to actually alter the way that you live your life. You know, unless of course a ghost appears in your room, in which case now you're in a position to have a much better answer than either of us.
I was gonna say at that point, then you got actually something to talk about. Maybe we'll have you on to chat about that and share that perspective, because we're shooting from the hip very much so in hypotheticals. But something you said there with the world changing, with you and everything being reflective of you, like it's fascinating. It's fascinating because like it's the same thing with, are you in the universe, or is the universe in you? Are you in your mind, or is your mind in you? And it's like, as you change, like, be the change you want to see. in the world. And so are you changing and the environment's changing, or the environment's changing and you're changing? And like, or maybe they go seamlessly hand in hand. And it's that line that's the issue. Not the issue, but that gets in the way of seeing that. Like we're making up a line. We're conceptualizing ourselves separate. And so the idea of me is the thing that gets in the way of, realizing that it's seamless, the change, the shifts, the environmental and the me changing. Like everything going on is entirely reflective of you. And there's like a spot with that where like, you feel very much alone in that. Cause like if everything's just like me changing, you start to feel a little bit more. It's like that balance between being in the driver's seat and being in the passenger seat almost. But it's interesting how, like, from one perspective, like the Michael Singer. I've never read any of his books, but I've heard some of his speeches and heard him talk about stuff. Sort of that back seat perspective is like, yeah, that's a perspective, but it's also there isn't quite so much responsibility in that perspective, and it's like it's showing up, and it's like showing up and being in the passenger seat. Like you can misconstrue that as being not responsible at all, and that's very much, I think, for me, the perspective that I held on to for, I don't know, maybe it was like, and I'm trying to like fucking pick a point. It's like it's fucking arbitrary. It's always in flux. Sometimes I'm in feeling like I'm in the forefront, and sometimes I feel like I'm in the back seat, and sometimes I feel like I'm in the pit of the fucking darkness, and you never know where it's gonna. Yeah, but that perspective, I don't know, probably like until June of this year, pretty much was kind of that, like, not as responsible, but also not as sensitive, and not as, you know as aware, just not as aware in general, because becoming aware of the world is becoming aware of yourself. And that's where the empathy comes from, is like you see it in yourself. And, it's been in flux. I'm not saying that, anything's changed that much necessarily. It's fucking, again, it's arbitrary, and I'm changing all the time. I've changed this week a fuckload, I feel like. So it's interesting though how we'll want to cherry pick certain things, be it a positive or a negative thing, and we'll just see ourselves in a certain way, and then go into a situation and cherry pick the ways that validate that perspective, that existing perspective, not even realize, just because I want to be sure, just because I want to know something. It's like, I don't know period anything about how a situation played out, or how a situation will play out, or how a situation is currently playing out, but I'll trade that for just some little inkling of certainty. It's like, no, that happened. My brain will I'll only notice the things that validate that perspective. That's it. And so I can't even know how things are playing out. All I can do is be sensitive and aware right now. And it really is like relaxation. In the face of that, like it's the only thing that makes any fucking sense, when you realize like, oh, I can't know anything about even what's going on right now.
It's the reason that you're quiet in the forest, right? It's because otherwise you have no sensitivity. If you're making a ruckus, you don't hear shit, right? And so you learn how to slow down. You learn how to stop making so many fucking ripples, so that way you can actually feel the ripples that you're experiencing. And that's the difference. We're not feeling any of the waves because we're splashing around. And that's what we're trying to get over doing, is let go of the splashing, and all of a sudden we're actually feeling the current. Actually, now we're feeling the waves for what they are, and it's just because we've stopped panicking. We've relaxed, and all that means is that we've just settled. It doesn't mean some laissez-faire attitude of nonchalance where it's like, maybe I'll have a beer while I deal with my hardships. It's like, it's not that at all. It's just recognizing that your idea of yourself has nothing to do with what you're going through. Right? And that takes away a great deal of the pressure, because that takes away from a lot of what it is you're actually going through, isn't it? right? Because it's not necessarily the problem of you going for a job, it's you judging yourself for not having one. Right? And that's what makes being unemployed more difficult, right? Because being unemployed is just straightforward. Look for a job. Keep looking for a job. But then come your preferences and your ego. Well, you don't want a certain kind of job. There are certain jobs you don't think you can get. You're certain jobs that you're not willing to do. Right. And then, of course, there's the danger of being judged and not getting the job, and all the risk about going into an interview and all your worry about that. All of that is unnecessary. Send out resumes, go to interviews, tell them who you are, answer their questions, be as honest as possible, and just rinse and repeat. And eventually you'll get a job. Right. And I'm saying this from life experience. And I know immediately somebody's going to look at this video and go, oh, white guy. All right. Dude, I've shoveled shit. I've shoveled manure, quite literally. I've changed toilets. I have crawled under crawl spaces. I have done fucking ugly, dirty, nasty fucking work for way less than I should have been paid, because the option was not having anything. But then that led me to something else. And that led me to something else. And that led me to something else. But the whole time I was going through that process, what made it harder than anything else was this nagging fucking judgment that I should be doing something else, not recognizing that what I'm doing now leads to something else. But there's this unnecessary pressure that goes with the fiction of me, and it just doesn't need to be there.
That shit can be there in any situation. Like even when you are in a spot where things do seem like, that spot you're hoping to get to, and there can be thoughts right there by yourself, even from little basic, you know, tiny little interactions. Something flutters up. Like there's no experience where there isn't the potential for that. And that brings you back to, where you're at right now is like, oh, if any other situation has just as much potential for me to feel this way or think about myself in this way, then, and I keep assuming I should be somewhere else, but like that spot that I assume I should be in has just as much potential for me to feel exactly the way that I feel right now in a spot that I feel like I shouldn't be, then I don't have that thing so much anymore to distract. And then I'm left with what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, but at least I can pay attention while I'm feeling it. Because if I'm feeling something and I assume that I should be somewhere else because I assume that that's going to cause something to go away, then it's going to continue to pop up and fuck, hold on. If I assume that I should be in a different spot than I am right now, then it's going to make it really, really difficult to pay attention right now to what's going on, because it's like you're feeling a certain way, assuming that it should be different. And that assumption is like taking the place of the attention that you could pay. But if you're not making the assumption, yeah, exactly, then there's the opportunity to continue to pay attention, and that's all you can do, But as long as it's like, oh, this should be happening differently than it is, and I know that for sure because I know things, and I bought into this idea that I can know something for sure, then it's going to create a lot of conflict and make it really fucking difficult to live and be sensitive and attentive to what's actually going on. So anyway,
Well
do you have
said.
another question? I got
Actually,
some stuff.
I wanted to throw this out there since we've answered a question and fumbled around a bit from there. I figured I would also remind our listeners this is a live call-in show. So if you have any thoughts on ghosts or anything that we've covered so far, and you'd like to jump on the show, or if you have a question that you'd like to discuss yourself, then you can do so. Dualisticunity.com/live. So you can actually join us. Just go to the site, fill in the form that says who you are, what you'd like to talk about, and the agreement that you're going to be on a podcast episode. And that you're not going to go, well, I'm not comfortable with that. I'd like you to remove that, because we're not doing it. Not doing it. If you're getting on here, you are on here. And that means that there is some value in you doing so just because you did it. So please, by all means, do join us if you can. But aside from that, there are some questions I know in the comments section. So I'll pass it over to Andrew and I'll see what he's got in mind, because I know I ambushed him with the whole ghost thing.
I think this is a fantastic opportunity to talk a tiny bit about the book, because I got a question. What is your book about?
Well, it's up to you, man. I mean, we can. I know we've released the title on tier 2 and tier 3, and I know that we read the chapter, or at least the first page and a bit of chapter 1 to our tier 3 supporters last weekend or on Sunday, which was great. The book is about you. Let's just simplify it. Okay, so the book is about you and your role in and as existence. So it breaks down a lot of shit in terms of like motivational mumbo jumbo, a lot of what you're hearing in terms of mindfulness, philosophy, stuff like that, and it kind of just breaks it all down to what it is you're trying to learn from that and why. Right. And so the first half of the book is very much applicable to your everyday endeavors, your everyday challenges, your everyday thoughts and doubts and fucking shit in your head. And then the second half of the book is big fucking picture, which takes all of that shit that you're dealing with and ties it to a lot of other things, just to give you a more well-rounded perspective of your life. See, nothing in this book is going to give you an answer on how to live. It's going to talk to you about living. It's going to talk to you about the richness and the fullness of living, the giant fucking question mark that we all deal with and panic over, and what remains when we don't panic, what we can see when the fear is not in the way. So I would say that is what the book is about. I'm not going to reveal the title yet because it wouldn't be fair to our Patreon supporters, especially on tier 1, who have been super patient. We're going to release the title of the book probably next week on our tier 1 Patreon. If you'd like to join us on Patreon, by the way, it's $5 a month for tier 1, $25 for tier 2, and $100 per month for tier 3. But you get incredible fucking shit. You get discounts, you get merch, you get to chat with us up to 5 days a week. And more importantly, you're helping to support this discussion. You're helping to support discussions like this because it's not just us. It's everybody else who's doing this. Not even people just listening to the podcast. You have to understand there are ripples that are happening in the world right now that are hitting us and impacting us through conversations that we're having with other people that we don't even know. There are people in the world right now that are making a difference in your life, and you've never met them. And that's very important to recognize that we are all in this together. So that said, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, and then I know we've got a few people in the queue, which makes me very excited. Good for them.
Yeah, and I think that that points well to the balance of the book, relaxation and responsibility, and how they just kind of go hand in hand, and awareness and relaxation. As you relax a little bit more, you see a little bit more. You allow yourself to even take in a little bit more. And so it's almost like, because I'm picking at, it's been a couple of days, but Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it's very much, yeah, I don't even know what the book's about, but just from the title, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's like our guide to reality. And not that it's a guide. I almost was like, don't say guide, but because it's not that. It's an opportunity to see where maybe some of the things that you're wondering where certain things come from, certain ways that you're viewing things that aren't necessarily talked about because they're things that aren't seen as, strengths or things that make sense when you're entirely focused on yourself. But as that starts to shift and you're not so entirely focused on yourself, things like empathy, sensitivity, they're not just things that are like nice things to do. They actually play into your life and impact your experience right now, not your, holistic sort of idea of yourself. Because sometimes those things don't make sense when you're striving to get somewhere and become the best in the world at fucking everything. It's actually has impact on your experience right now because that's all that you ever are. Like that's it. You're not an idea, you're just what you are right now, each and every moment, over and over and over, constantly changing, and constantly always yourself, even when you're doubting that a bunch. And so it just goes into, and there's examples, and there's little there's what is it, studies and all that good stuff. So yeah, it's fucking awesome, and I'm really excited to start getting into the second half at some point too. But I'm thoroughly enjoying the first half so far because there's a lot of good fucking applicable shit in there, and I now see that there are two people in the waiting
Yeah,
room.
but it's been a hell of a journey. Like, this has been a lot of fun just writing this first half. But fuck, is it ever coming along? Eh? Like, I just love the process of going back and forth because, as everybody knows, I have an aversion to fucking silver bullet mentalities. I have an aversion to anything that's like, this is going to make your life better. And so in this book, we offer some exercises, but we also offer a shit ton of caution about over utilizing those exercises, recognizing that they are tools, but that ultimately it's up to you to build the tools that work for you. And then once those tools start working, to have the courage to let them go and create new ones. That said, we're going to get to the people in the queue at the moment. I'm going to leave it up to Andrew to decide who comes in first.
Oh, all right. Hold on. All right. We'll get Amanda in here, kick things off.
It's a good choice.
See what she's up to.
Well, especially given that she's going to be on tomorrow's episode of High and Empowered, which is going to be dope.
Yeah.
For anybody who hasn't checked that out, by the way, noon Eastern time every Wednesday, Oren Allen and our intern, Julia Raymond, will be hosting High and Empowered, a new podcast within the Dualistic Unity network of podcasts. We're very fucking excited. Amanda, howdy.
Hey.
Hey, good to see you.
I was laughing because I was like, oh, I don't even know which number I'm at in the queue. And then it's like, oh, we get to pick it. I was like, oh, I wonder who they're gonna. And then automatically I see my camera loading. I was like, okay, I guess it was me. Let's hop in. What's up, guys? so, so it definitely felt like what's behind door number one? Holy shit, it's me. But I definitely love calling in because there's so many great questions and I'm not always excited about all of them, but it's still an opportunity to explore something, and it doesn't always have to be my preference that we're exploring.
This is true. This is true. So, out of the myriad of things that we've covered so far, would you like to weigh in on anything, or would you like us to tackle a new question, or have you come with a question?
I haven't come. The only question on my mind is how did we measure for two shelves and one is perfectly straight and the other is not? And it was straight when we didn't put the screw anchor, but once we put the screw anchor, now one is shifted. So now it's like, well, how was it perfectly straight just a minute ago? And now it's not. So that's like the only question that's on my mind is how did we fuck this up? But
I'm going to go out on a limb based on the theme of the episode so far and say ghosts.
We could jump into ghosts, but the answer is going to be real quick. Never believed enough, never had any encounters myself, and never believed it enough for it to become a boogeyman that I was scared of. So like I never thought that I knew everything or that that ghosts didn't exist. I just never encountered them, and I didn't believe the story enough to scare myself without encountering a ghost firsthand. So I was like, I'll believe it when I see it.
Right? And there's plenty of scary motherfucking humans out there to add on.
The living are way scarier. I was like, a ghost, what you gonna do? Fucking say boo? Boo back, motherfucker. Like
can they even do anything to you? Like if they can fly through you, then can they I
don't know, but there's like a spectrum. Isn't there like a spectrum where like you're talking from like ghosts to demons, and then it's like some some stories they can move things, some can't, some can possess you, some can't, and it's like, all right, well, I guess do your best at demon corp, climb that corporate ladder, get possession skills with that next promotion. I don't know how they do it.
That's it. I mean, it's so very easy to forget that when we're talking about the actual real deal, like when you actually do talk to people who take this shit seriously and who think they have performed exorcisms and all of this other stuff, when you go and you actually talk to them, it's nothing like what you see in the movies. Like in the movies, they'll tell you like this is based on a real story, and like there's something floating across the room, and then you talk to the person who actually went through it, and they're like, yeah, we saw the doll on the front step, and we threw it out, and then the next day it was back on the front step. It's like, because someone returned it, you dick. Like it's so very different when it comes down to the reality of it, rather than what we're used to seeing in the media or on movies and whatnot. And that's unfortunately what happens, is that you start talking about ghosts, people start thinking about, you know, The Nun, or they start thinking about, you know, a movie that they've seen recently about some kind of a demonic force. And the worst are the ones recently that have come out where it's about the two paranormal investigators, and so they're always involved in these paranormal exercises. I can't remember what their names are. There's a whole series that was released by Bloomhouse. It's all based on real events of these two paranormal investigators. And if you go and you compare the movies to what's actually happened from the actual documentation from these investigators, it's nothing alike. It's nothing alike at all. Annabelle, perfect example. If anybody's ever seen the movie Annabelle, it's a girl, creepy doll. Okay, that's based on a real story. But if you go and you look up at the actual real story, it was a Raggedy Ann doll. It didn't look anything like that. It wasn't creepy. It wasn't terrifying. It just kept showing up in weird places, right? And that was it. Like, it had nothing. It was nothing like what we're seeing in our imaginations.
I just imagine being the adult who's like moving this doll around, like snickering around the corner.
No, I actually wanted to
I'm
do
gonna put
that
it in
to
the freezer.
somebody.
They're gonna lose their shit over breakfast.
It's
Like,
so funny because I had a neighbor who told me she was just terrified of the Annabelle movie, and I just wanted to get a doll and just leave it on her deck, like just one day, just across the street, sitting by a tree or something, and then just move it to somewhere else and just fuck with her for the rest of the week because she wasn't very nice. But I didn't do that because, you know, reasonable heads prevailed and all of that. That said, though, since you didn't come to the episode with a question, we had another question after this, and I'm going to read it to you so that way you can weigh in on it. What are some cool ways that you guys have decided to get outside of your comfort zones lately? So, Amanda, aside from putting up shelves.
yeah, being a guest on a podcast tomorrow. Like, that is actually my first time being on LinkedIn, and I still have my corporate life, and that corporate life does not reflect a lot of the perspectives shared and discussed and explored. And so I am nervous about doing the live show tomorrow and talking about weed, because I still have a corporate job that does not encourage working under any influence. So like, that is how I'm putting myself out of my comfort zone, is just putting myself out there in a really public way where it can reflect. My boss could see that tomorrow, like as it's live, because it's LinkedIn. So there's a potential for crossover, but it is during my lunch hour. You know, my time is my own, and if it comes up as a point of conflict, you know, I will address it as best as possible. But I'd rather take this invitation openly than stay scared, because I don't know that anything is going to go wrong. I don't know that anybody from my corporate life is going to see this, and I'd rather jump in than stay scared in the corner with nothing but my assumptions to accompany me.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, because why do I need that anyway? At the end of the day, and I ask myself that all the time. But it's that's how you grow, right? You just continue to jump in, and you don't know how it's going to play out, or what someone's going to see, or how someone's going to respond. So yeah, but I can go next. uh Admittedly, like, I don't even know if it's funny, because like, to someone it may seem ridiculous, but I haven't been going to the gym as much, and like, that's straight up been outside my comfort zone, because it's such a familiar habit. Like, it's literally something I've done, like I've talked about it before, since I was 13, and like 15 years, and it's something that I didn't not do for more than like a week or two. And so despite it not see okay, it's not like outside anything, it's like a familiar way of seeing myself and viewing myself, and not doing that. It's like, it's straight up, people talk about the gym like it's this, oh, objectively good thing to do. It's been harder for me to not go than it was to go. Like, and that's what it becomes. But there's this sort of societal sort of thing where it's no, it leans on the side of a good thing, and it's just like, it's how you spend your time, what you give attention to. And so that, and I mean, starting the run club, I haven't done it yet, but like putting that out there is absolutely not something in my comfort zone. Just like making fucking a call for a group, like a big group decision, and just being like, what I'm picking, this is what I'm doing, and this is where we're going, and this is what's happening, and this is, and kind of just like, and I know we fucking have retreats, and so this is, it's been, it's, there's so much about the retreats that I could delve into, but I won't right now because I've already given some answers. But anyway, I'll pass.
I don't know about you, but I'm curious as shit. I just want to say, as for me, I don't really have a comfort zone. And what I mean is that I'm so very aware of how little I really know. And more importantly, I'm very aware of how often I've made assumptions just based on how little I really know. And so every day, like several times a day, and when I say several times a day, I mean several times a day, I just go through the discomfort of recognizing that life's a giant question mark. I don't know how I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, if there is a right thing. I don't know how people see me. I don't know. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know any of that. Okay? More importantly, I don't know if there's a better way for me to be me. I don't know anything outside of just what I am. That's what I know. What I am in this moment. And I bring myself back to that place so very often that comfort's not even a question. Like it's not even something I look to. It's not one of those things where I'm like, oh, now I can get comfortable. That's not a thought in my head. You know, and it's just because what am I saying? Oh, now I can tune out life. Oh, now I can go to sleep for a bit. Oh, that's comfortable. And I don't want to go to sleep. I spent enough time asleep. Now I want to be aware. I enjoy being aware. I enjoy being alive. You know, so what's an interesting way of getting out of my comfort zone? Living here and now and staying outside of this fucking mesh of false assumptions that only made me think that I knew what was going on and only ever limited me. So I would say that would be my answer there.
All said. Yeah, it's funny how we assume that we got to do something to get out of it, and so much of it is just the repetitive sort of common narrative that I know what's happening right now. And just the willingness to question that can be incredibly fucking uncomfortable, you know? So
this has been a blast. Amanda, thank you for being our first caller. For everybody who is wondering when you can tune in to see Amanda next, not only will she be on High and Empowered tomorrow, but she will also be recording an episode of Dualistic Unity Real on Friday at, what time is that? 4 p.m. Eastern time? 4 p.m. Eastern time. Tune in for those episodes because they're a lot of fun. And Amanda, we really appreciate you being here. Absolutely. And we'll see you in Patreon after this, hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. I'll be in the comments. Bye.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for joining. That was fun.
That was fun.
Solid. Yeah. Solid
Absolutely.
questions right there.
Now we shall let the next person in who has been sitting patiently waiting for his opportunity to come into the conversation, either to ask a question, answer a question, or just shoot the shit. Who knows? This is our very first call-in show. It is a Q&A and call-in show, and we're actually going to label it that because it's fucking ridiculous, and I love it. All right. So here we go. We're going to let him in. If you would like to join us, remember, dualisticunity.com/live. You can enter the queue, and then you can have your 10 minutes on the podcast. If you have any more questions, do list them in the comments section. I see some more, so we will get to them as soon as we can.
Fuck yeah. Keep them coming. Luke.
Sir.
What's up, man?
Hello.
Good to see you.
How's everyone doing?
Doing quite well.
Yeah, I was gonna say stuff, but after what Ray said, I'm like, damn, like that is fucking incredible. Like he doesn't even look to comfort. He's just alive. Like getting on this, like I was like kind of uncomfortable a little bit, but it's like, and because like he was saying, I don't know what anyone thinks about me. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if it's the right decision or wrong decision. And uh, like before the retreat, like I went on the retreat, and before the retreat, I was like, oh, what does Ray and Andrew think of me? And I was like, it doesn't really even matter what they think of me. They just like it really doesn't matter. Just talk about what you want to talk about, and like there's no, you never know if you're making the right or wrong. So you might as well just be aware, have sensitivity to what you're doing. Um, but talk about what you want to talk about. Do what you want to do, because it's like at the end of the day, it's not really gonna, you know, matter. Uh,
Except to you.
um, yeah. Um,
It's
yeah,
fascinating how much weight put on that, dude.
yeah, I'm really excited for the book to come out. I'm hoping like we can just flip through the chapters and see, okay, this is what I want to focus on today. Like that's going to be really cool. I'm hoping there is a chapter on like validation. I've been thinking about that. I know I posted in the Discord, but no one answered me, but it's okay. I kind of like worked through I kind of like worked through it on my own. I was like, it doesn't even matter like if you're doing it for yourself or doing it for validation, because it's like that's just a concept in itself. I think we talked about it at the retreat as well. Um, but it kind of just been sinking in with me lately. It's like that really doesn't matter. Like if you do recognize that you're seeking validation or whatever, it's like you just recognize it and like you see, okay, there's going to be the consequences of it. It's like, do I want to deal with those consequences? But it's mostly just doing stuff and seeing the consequences and being aware. It's not really like, oh, do I have to do this for validate, or am I doing it for myself or doing it for validation? So you're just in the bullshit again. It's like, damn, that's kind of interesting. So I just kind of been sitting with that, and I was like, damn, I don't have to ever get over that. There's nothing to get over. Like we're always in somewhat kind of doing that, looking for validation. Um, and that's okay. Like you don't have to work through it. It's just like it is what life is. It's like it doesn't matter. So you just have to see through, go through it, see the consequences. You don't like it, do something else. Like it's pretty simple, and it's like we get so caught up. So like that kind of realization of just like you kind of have to just see it through. Like you like a lot of shit you're never gonna know if you don't see it through. Um it's like the meme where he's like got the Skittles in his hand. He's like, got to see it through, my boy. um uh but yeah, so um what I did want to bring up was that like um what was I gonna say? Actually, I'm gonna take a break. You guys, if you guys have any thoughts,
I
and
appreciate
then
that.
I'll
I wanted to weigh in
yeah.
on weigh in on that
Yeah.
quickly because I like what you said there. It's funny because we actually will learn just by moving forward. Like you don't have to be sitting there going, God, am I self-validating? What am I doing? Because you get really lost in it. But you'll notice going through life that when you are self-validating, when you don't notice it, and all of a sudden you're comparing yourself, you're competing yourself, you're defending yourself in order to save face, and then you realize the consequence with the relationship with the person that you're talking to, either that they feel diminished, or all of a sudden they're like, why the fuck are you talking that to me? Like they have some kind of a reaction to it because it was superfluous. It wasn't a necessary move. It wasn't something you had to do. You did it out of some habitual reaction, some habitual fear response, right? And that's it. You did it. There was a reaction. And if you're paying attention, you'll be like, oh, fuck, I just did that. And that made that person uncomfortable. All right. Otherwise, you're going to go, fuck, I just did that. I'm still getting lost in it. And you're going to judge the fuck out of yourself instead of just going, oh, and then moving on. But we really think that unless we're like taking our list of notes at the end of the day, what did I learn today? I learned this, and this, and this, and this, and then writing it down, fucking memorizing what we learned that day that we haven't already learned it. Right? We forget that we're learning it as we're going through it. That's the best way to do it. Like I could spend all day long telling you how to use a hammer, but until I put a hammer in your hand, you're not actually going to learn how to pay attention.
And so that just plays into as you're doing stuff, as you're learning things and going through things like being yourself, if that's, the ultimate thing than jumping into something and being yourself, despite all the assumptions that like, well, no, I can't do this, couldn't possibly do this. What about this? What about that? Can't act like this, can't do this, can't do that. Like that's like none of those have to not happen for the situation to go in a certain way. It's actually being able to jump in and be like, oh, those are all there, and being aware of whatever's going on, and whatever you're dealing with or going through is like it allows you to actually be aware, to continue to be aware. It's like you're either aware of what's happening, you're aware of yourself, making assumptions about yourself, judging yourself, doing something. And as soon as you're doing that, you're not aware of what's actually happening. So it's like, oh, I'm not aware. And then there's almost like it's like the more you are willing to be aware, the more you're going to realize when you're not, the more intense it's going to feel when you're not, just because the difference in that experience. Like you have a little bit more of a taste for what that's not like. And so it continues to, create more of a gap almost between that. And it's not that it isn't this, the distraction, whatever, isn't like this subdued sort of undertone of just like a full layer. It's more acute almost, like all that sort of rigidity or false certainty that you're holding on to, like it's felt so much more because it's not, so glazed over like it has been. It just, and that's when you become numb to things. Like you feel that shit when you're actually paying attention to what's going on and aware of your own desire to validate certain things or like reasons to not be yourself and just jump in and see what the fuck happens.
It immediately reminds me of a tree. Like we forget, and especially like, see, I have the advantage over both of you of like 16 to 20 years of experience, and so I look back at so much more of what I've went through because I have that context, right? But it's very much like a tree that's grown to a certain degree, looking back at its sapling self, right, and going, why wasn't I tougher? Why wasn't I stronger? Why didn't I have deeper roots? I was getting blown about by everything. It's like, how the fuck do you think you established those roots? Like that's the only way you get to be a bigger tree is by getting blown around by the fucking wind. Like that's the whole fucking point. And we forget that. We judge ourselves. We're like, no, I'm supposed to have answers to things. I'm supposed to know how to deal with life. It's like you cannot know how to deal with life unless you are life, because that's all you get to deal with is yourself. That's it. So if you're dealing with some fiction in your head of what life is, if you're dealing with assumptions of what people are, the world is, where we're going, what's happening, all that shit, you're not living. And then you wonder, why don't I feel more able in social situations? Why don't I feel better at making decisions? It's because you're always thinking about yourself. Right? And that's the whole thing. Like, think about it. You make a decision, and then after the decision, something happens. And then as you could be adapting to what happens, you think to yourself, fuck, I should have made a different decision. How much of your attention just got pulled away from what you could be making the most of? Simply because now you've gone back in your head and to judge yourself for what you are where you are. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything to look back and go, I should have done it differently. Shut up. This is where you are. Like, this is what you've got. And it's just that fucking simple, but we forget that it's addictive. It's addictive to think about yourself. It's very satisfying to think that you're in control or that you can have control, including over your path in life. And that is exactly what we're trying to do when we're judging ourselves. We're trying to dictate our path. We're trying to make sure we're on the right one.
Luke, do you have anything else
I
you
mean,
wanted to
I don't have
share?
anything else to add. I could add, like, I could, ramble on for hours, but that was perfect. Uh, I think, yeah, I'll hand it off to someone else.
Well, we really appreciate you being here, buddy. It's always nice to see you. Hopefully we'll see you in the Patreon call later, but otherwise, thank you for being our second guest today in this new call-in segment. I know it's ridiculous, but we're going to deal with it. Have a great day, man. We'll talk to you in a bit.
Luke, great chatting as always. That was fun. The Quallen show, the inaugural Quallen show. But yeah, I mean, holy fuck, dude, the amount of time you can spend just like, and you start to realize, because when you are thinking about yourself, focused on yourself, there's more sensitivity to it. And like part of me is like, holy fuck, this was the constant. This was all and everything of like everything that I was day and night. And now it like I was saying, it's more of the acute sort of like, it's more like a poke or a stab than a sort of subdued, like larger constant blow. Yeah. It's like it's very poignant, like it's felt, and it's like, whoa, what's going on right now? But I'm aware of it because when you are thinking about yourself, it's like there's, you got your grab bag of shit that you do, your grab bag of responses, grab bag of things based on some perspective. And it's like you just keep all that stuff in mind. And it's from assuming that like you're done growing in a sense, like this is figured out, and how much of the world is fucking trying to be figured out and like solved. Like you're something that can be figured out or solved, as opposed to an ever-changing moment to moment to moment to moment. Because then if you're just change moment to moment to moment to moment, something changing, shifting, it's a lot harder to settle upon a stagnant idea, as that does continue to shift and change and grow and shift and change and grow. As that happens, it's really tough to maintain an idea. So like you almost have to try and like do things to try and perpetuate that, in a sense, that idea, to continue it on. And one of those ways is to continually think about yourself. So
And ask how
I
you're
got
doing. To ask how
yeah.
you're doing, because that's it. How am I doing? Oh no, don't do that. Don't do that. Whatever you do, don't ask, because you don't know and you can't know, but you can sure as shit make assumptions. And if you're feeling low, you're gonna beat the fuck out of yourself as soon as you ask. And just don't open the door. Just leave Pandora's box closed and fucking get on with your day. I promise you'll feel better shortly. It's gonna pass. We did have another question. Do you want to ask the next one?
Yes, I had the next one was something that or no, I did the last one.
All
You
right,
got it.
fair enough. Well, this person's been waiting for a little while. They were actually in the social episode earlier, and they had some questions, and so they're referencing that. I was watching you on a previous live, and I wanted to elaborate on what we were discussing. I really connect with the idea of letting go of control and being present, and also that it takes time to untangle those synapses. That if you're thinking about how to be you, you really are not being you. However, I find myself in a point in my life where everything is uncertain in terms of work, living situation, relationships, which brings a lot of insecurity. So I find it especially hard not to judge myself, accept what is happening, and focus on the present. Have you gone through something similar? Any thoughts on how to apply your ideas in practice and in these situations? Yes. So I'm going to throw this one in there right now. I just went through the end of an 18-year marriage. I am currently a single dad, raising my teenage daughter, working on creating a business slash podcast with my partner, who I met like 2.5 years ago. We have no idea where it's going. We're literally going against the grain in every capacity. We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing in terms of a podcast or a community or a business or a corporation. We make decisions based entirely on authenticity rather than profit and control. My life is one giant bag of uncertainty all the time, all the time. And this has all just happened in the last 6 months in terms of my relationship, my marriage, and trying to establish everything else. And so what I would say is rinse and repeat. Like everything I told you earlier, it's exactly the same. What you're doing right now is you're reverting back to, but how do I deal with this? You don't think about it. You just keep going. You're trying to establish another sense of control. You're trying to establish another sense of, but surely I'm dealing with more uncertainty than everybody else. No, everybody's in the exact same amount of uncertainty. It's just that some of us have larger or more layers of false assumption on top of it. Right? We're all in uncertainty all the time, forever. That is reality. That's existence. Right? So if you're in uncertainty right now, settle in, because this is the process of you getting good at it. But that means you have to let go of the idea that you need a respite from uncertainty. You have to let go of that comfort.
Well said. Because those are the points that you really do grow. And like that's kind of when you're feeling like extra uncomfortable, like you're in the shit, whatever, however you want to say it, like seeing that not as something that's an issue, discomfort and growth and change and all that stuff is indicative. Like in order to grow and shift and change, you have to be uncomfortable. So if you are uncomfortable, it's indicative of that. And so it's not just the entirety of the situation isn't something to be avoided, because like the situation is what it is, as much as that's like, so fucking generic and cliche. Like having assumptions about it, yeah, it's like it's like it's not cliche, it's just like it is. It's just something that we don't want to, because if we're making assumptions about it, then we don't like that it is what it is. But like whatever, wherever we're at, like it is. And so what can I do with that? What can I do with it? If it is just what it is, what can I do in response to that? And it's, yeah, continue and do your best to relax, because relaxing is going to allow you to at least take in the most of what's going on, but seeing it not as something that's an issue, as uncomfortable as it feels, it is very helpful. Like not seeing it as all of these things are shifting and changing and all of this uncertainty, and there's nothing wrong. I'm growing a lot right now. I'm shifting a lot right now. A lot is changing, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is what it is, again. So yeah, it doesn't mean that like, and that's kind of how the podcast usually goes. Like anything that I say isn't necessarily going to make anything feel better, but it's shifting that perspective on, do I have to feel better? Like, because that's going to put me at odds with everything all the time if I'm just constantly trying to feel better. And that's what we see in response to all of that. It's false certainty. It's this glaze, this veil of like feeling a little bit better, but just continuing to avoid what I'm trying to feel better from, even. And is it just uncertainty? Is that just what I'm trying to feel better about? And the only cure to that is false certainty, because there's no certainty in response to that discomfort. So the more you're willing to just like, yeah, not be so goddamn sure, then there isn't going to be so much in at least cutting you down as you go.
I think it's great. It's like, I'm suffering because of my resistance to uncertainty. It's like, then stop resisting.
Exactly. And like we don't want to look at that. Like, but that's where it stems from, right there is that resistance to the uncertainty of what's
Let
going
go
on.
or be dragged. That's pretty much it.
Amen.
I believe it's your question.
It is. I just have one more over here. Oh yeah, because that one, yeah, we already answered those yesterday. What is your take on religion?
Okay, I'll throw this out there. I think religion is a beautiful thing. I think religion is something that humanity should absolutely take in, consider, and actually apply in their day-to-day lives. Now, here's what I mean about that. I don't mean the practice of following a book or a fictional figure or believing in fucking nonsense. Religion, or religio, the etymology of which is to bind together. So religion was only ever supposed to be a practice that brought us together. And yet it's become a tool of identity, a tool of ego to identify us, to give us a sense of certainty, a sense of a path, a sense of the right way, a sense of somebody who's in control and how to appease them, a sense of separation, a sense of irresponsibility. It's given us all of this, and it's broken us into pieces. It's taken humanity and divided us up. This is why most of our religious wars, or most of our wars, are religious ones, right? If it wasn't religion, then it's nationalism, which is another form of identity. So I would say that religion, the original definition, the original concept, the insight behind it, it's a great idea. The only problem with it is the only true religion is none, because that is what we are all part of. Reality didn't give us a religion. We weren't born into a world where life actually came to us and said, here's the book. You just got to read this and learn this, and God's going to watch you. No, it was a bunch of people who wrote a fucking book. They're like, oh, here's the book. And it's like, well, where'd this come from? Well, we wrote it. No, God wrote it through us. No, read that. It's like, hold on. Okay, so none of that happened. And so the only true religion, the only true way to commune with reality, to actually get in touch with what is happening, is through you. It's through you. And that is true for everyone. And in that state of a pathless path, we are all in this together because we can relate. And that's what makes our goddamn retreats so goddamn wonderful, is that they are an act of religion, which is fucking hilarious to say, because religion is the last thing you're ever going to see at one of these retreats in terms of the typical dogmatic kind, right? But it is an act of coming together. And that act happens through all of us just being willing to be vulnerable with ourselves. It has nothing to do with everybody else at all. And that's why the only true religion is none. I've said that many times, and I will continue to say it because it sounds good and it's fucking offensive to believers.
Yeah, because we see that with, religions come together for mass, but it's all based on sharing the same false certainty. And like, there's so much goddamn judgment in like church and religion and shit. It's insane. It's like the backbone of it is judgment. And like, God is seen as a judgmental figure. But, when it comes to being yourself and religion, and it's just like everyone wants a daddy. Like everyone wants, and a lot of people just pick Sky Daddy to be their daddy. But it's all like they're it's all man-made stuff. Like it's all just idealistic shit we put out there. Like nothing's coming to us from anything. It's all expressions of us, of where we're at, of any of the things that we settle upon or believe. And there's zero awareness. I want to look. And zero, it's arbitrary, the degree of awareness, whatever. But we want to look to something else, to someone else, for the right way to act, the right way to be. And so we look to parents initially for the right way to be, and then we look to society and the world, and we want to find something to be sure of, like something that I can know. And people are willing to admit, like, no, I don't know this for sure, but everyone's belief is valid, just like everyone's got their belief, and I got my belief, and you got your belief, and it's all this underlying assumption that like belief is the only way to exist. What do you don't believe in anything? That's crazy. That's wild. You don't believe in anything. How could you possibly? How do you brush your teeth? Like grab the toothbrush, put some toothpaste on it, and go back and forth a little bit. That's life right there. I'm living life. Like you can do that. But what about after death? Like, well, believing in something doesn't change the inherent uncertainty, right? That right there, it'll cut you down. It'll cut you down on your ability to just be yourself and see where that goes and what happens when you are a little bit more relaxed. Like it requires you to maintain. It's like if everything that we believe in about ourselves, about society, about the world, about religion is like a layer of some degree of tension. It's like there's a layer of tension right there. It's like all that shit you're believing through a religion, like you don't know that. You don't know that. But like seeing that and then being like, no, but I want to know this. It's just like maintaining that layer of tension just to feel like something, and being willing to not know. It's like then a little bit more awareness comes into play, and then it's like, oh, not so sure of that. So all this other shit could be on the table, because those were always in potential, but I was only looking at the little corner of the table. I wasn't looking at the rest of the table, maintaining this belief. And so anyway, I'm hearing stuff over here, and I have this door cracked for this cat, and there's a raccoon that comes by sometimes. So I'm I'm gonna
You go
close this
address
door
that.
real quick.
That's a good idea. Absolutely, definitely address a possible raccoon. Though, admittedly, and for anybody who doesn't know, I actually do have a fantasy about having a pet raccoon at one point in my life. A pet raccoon and a pet squirrel, just because I think that would be fucking badass. They're both awesome animals and very intelligent, and I think that my cat would find it a lot of fun, especially in his older years.
For sure. And raccoons are big motherfuckers, and like they act exactly as they're depicted too. They're so like such a like cartoon character. Like this one that came by, it comes by because I was leaving the food outside for the cat. Now it's the food's inside, and so the cat will come in. Richard Parker, shout out to my homie. And so the raccoon will come by, and I saw it like come by, and the first night I saw it, didn't realize it, and I was like, "What the fuck is that?" Because it was big. It was like 2 or 3 times bigger than the cat, which is like typical sized house cat. And I see its shadow, and I'm like, "What the fuck is that?" I think I was sitting over here, and I get up, or I heard it. I heard the crunches, and I'm like, "That's not the cat." Right there. I was like, what the fuck? So I went and checked, and it was, the raccoon. It's got the black over its eyes, and it does the thing with its hands. I saw it kind of like waddling away down the stairs, and yeah, it kind of looked back at me, and it was like doing its hand thing like this, and it's so funny to see that. But it's just like how it's depicted, and even how like a bandit is depicted, and then that's kind of how they act. Like they'll dig into garbages and just like take stuff, and they're very like human like in their actions in a lot of ways, and their mannerisms and their kind of emotions in a sense.
Oh man, I can't wait till this summer. We're planning a Dualistic Unity community camping trip this summer, and we're going out onto Vancouver Island on the West Coast, which is going to be just a lot of fun. But I remember last time I went there with my daughter, we were camping, and I was over chopping some wood, and all of a sudden I hear, Dad, and it was night, and this raccoon just kind of crawls out of the root system of this tree that was beside our tent, and he's just kind of wanders up, like looks at her. And she's like, what am I supposed to do? And he's just curious, and he just fucked off after that, right? But yeah, for the most part, like they're just curious unless you spook them. I mean, it's like any other wild animal, right? But yeah, they're really intelligent. They're very interesting little creatures. I love the fact that they have thumbs. Like just stuff like that. You're like, oh my. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Anybody who's interested in that camping trip, by the way, we're going to be sending out the details probably in the next month, looking for people who want to reserve a camping spot. This is going to be the cheapest Dualistic Unity event, in the fact that we are not providing anything. You are basically just going to pay for your tent site. We're going to arrange it for you, and then you are required to bring your own tent, your own camping gear, your own shit. If you can't bring your own tent, then we can pick one up for you here on Vancouver Island, and then after the fact, we'll donate it to somebody who's in the homeless population, or to a community shelter, or to I don't know, the Boy Scouts, something like that. So if you can't afford, or if you can't bring your own tent to the island, we can get you a tent, and then we'll donate it after the fact, and that just helps out other people as a whole. But it's going to be an awesome event. We're going to go camping. I'm fucking stoked. We had another question here. This one's a quick one. Random curious question. How did you guys meet? I would recommend that you check out episode 1, season 1 of the podcast, where we talk about it in a little bit of detail. We also talk about it in, I think, the anniversary special that came out a year later. Basically, we met on TikTok. That's the short answer. We met on TikTok. We talked twice. We had 1 hour-long conversation on video before the podcast, and then we made a podcast. End of story. I hope that was satisfying. Okay. That said, we had another question. Have you guys watched The Egg? Yes, actually, it's funny because after I released that video from 2005, 3 years ago, the video that actually Andrew and I met through, people kept saying like, oh, it sounds like The Egg, sounds like The Egg, sounds like The Egg. And I was like, all right, cool. So I'll go check it out. And so I did. It's okay. I didn't mind it. I didn't blow my socks off. I'm not like, oh my God. And the only reason is because I found it a little limited. And in the fact that it was always just humans, for one. It's not just humans that are all this one consciousness. It's everything. It's all plants, life, fungus, fuck, name it. If it's aware, it's part of it. That, and the fact that it's not like it's all part of one thing that's part of other gods and all that. It's all one thing. It's all just you. It's all just you. All those other gods are all just you. It's all you. at the end of the day. So I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. I think they could have expanded on it and made it even more uncomfortable, but then I don't think it would have been as popular.
Right. There's a point that it like it's enough to be comfortable. And I see that kind of with just way even like it's funny because I posted I've been posting a little bit more of older videos, and to me I'm like and like old videos from like 3 years ago, and to me I'm like I don't recognize myself at all. Like this is, there's stuff in it that I'm not saying anything that different, but I just can't comprehend like how someone would appreciate it or like gain anything from it almost, because I'm like, whoa, there's a lot of stress and tension there. And yet, people will comment like, yo, thanks for this video, resonates, whatever. And it almost like puts my mind in a pretzel. And like we were talking about earlier, like we don't know what the impacts are of anything that we're doing ever. Like we really don't. And we'll talk about whatever, something will pop up, express it, share it, whatever. I have no idea. It's just going into this fucking void of uncertainty all the time that I'm always stepping through and always sharing things just into this place that I can never actually know, no matter what sort of responses that you get. You're just kind of alone in your experience in that way. And so anyway, with the egg, because how does it end again? It's like you experience all the lives on Earth, and but like there is kind of the undertone of like individuality experiencing it. And so it's like other versions of you, but emphasis on the other instead of you, that sort of thing. At least and it's because there's not even really necessarily a tone. That's just how I have read it and perceived it.
It just doesn't leave you alone. See, that's the point, is that the book just doesn't leave you alone. The egg doesn't leave you alone. What it does is it leads you to being alone. And then it says, but don't worry, you're part of other gods. And that's where it kind of jumps ship, because the alternative is super uncomfortable. Super uncomfortable, and not something that anybody wants to look at. Deepak did the same thing in How to Know God. He walked all the way through it, clearly indicating that you're God without ever actually saying it, and then just ended the book. Right? And it's just because at that point, people stop buying it. At that point, people get offended. People go into reactionary mode, because it's like Alan Watts said, and I love the fact that Alan Watts is one of the only people I know who ever said it this fucking clearly. God is what we all are, and nobody wants to admit to being.
And like, and there's been points where I feel like that's been sort of clear. And there's points where it's like so fucking obvious. And then there's points where it's like, no, it's like, and even points where it's like, no, I don't want that to be the case. And like, and that's just it. Like, I don't want that. I don't want that I don't want to be alone in my experience. But then if you're willing to, it's like, it's so much, but because it's like changes everything. It doesn't change everything at the same time. It's that sort of thing that, oh, it's just me living my life just a little bit more nonchalant about things. Like there's an undertone of relaxation, of humor, of just how is on the spectrum of like how seriously you're taking yourself and everything else, because they go hand in hand. It's like how seriously you take other people, how seriously you take the world, how seriously you take yourself. And like that's, if anything, the biggest shift, but it has to do with your experience. It's not some conceptual thing like I'm God, like the fucking motherfucker, the guy who's smartest man in the world. I finished that video last night, and just the sort of like slow, like, well, I don't know if, the person asked what, like, oh, would that indicate that there's a point where maybe you could, if you can become one with God? Could you be God? It's like, well, you know, someone, it's in potential, possibly, could be you. Like, would you be willing to take that on? Yeah, I would. And just oh my God, just think, and it's the extreme of, for anyone, I don't even know what it's called. It's something about smartest man in the world. And
His name is
it's the
Chris Langan.
Chris Langan. And it's just the extreme of valuing how intelligent you are. And like, have you ever met someone as smart as you? Like, I haven't come across them. Yeah, who knows? It's in potential, but unlikely. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude. Holy fucking shit. So it's funny, but that's like that. And that Sky Daddy is like the extreme of just egotistical becoming God. And that's why there's such an aversion to someone saying, like, you're God, I'm God, because you start to even chip at that, or look at that for a bit. And the extreme is that you're alone, is that you're entirely alone in your experience. But that's where freedom exists as well. It's not just like, oh, it's scary. It's like, no, you're free. Now you're free. Now you're free. But, you know, anyway.
But that's it. There's the reality, which you may or may not like. And that's your option, right? You can think about it, or you can just live. And if you live, then you are left with one of two choices, right? How to perceive here and now. You're either going to perceive a loss at the fact that this moment will never happen again, or you're going to perceive joy at the fact that the next moments to come are totally uncertain and unknown. They could have anything. And so we have loss and joy all the time, or fear and joy, if you'd like to look at it that way, because with loss comes fear, right? Which kind of goes back to our next question. How do you deal with fears that kind of come up for you, right? With loving embrace. Like, and I mean that. I don't assume that being afraid is indicative of a problem. I think that it is a necessary half of the spectrum to the experience of living. And I know that because if you experience joy long enough, fear will start to creep in, because you're going to become afraid of losing that joy, right? Whereas if you experience fear long enough, joy will start to creep in at the idea of the fear ending. And so they're really the same thing on a different side of the spectrum. They're connected wholeheartedly. And so for me, rather than dwelling in one, I'm always aware of both. So even when I'm in joy, I'm aware of the fear that underlies it, which is why I don't attach to the joy. That's why I don't cling for it. I don't crave it, right? Is because I'm prepared to deal with the fear. Whereas the craving, the attachment, comes from trying to escape the fear rather than embracing it as another way to learn, as another facet of my existence, as another whole spectrum of perception. And the same is true when I'm afraid. I remember, like, I'm learning, and there's the joy immediately. And so I always embrace both. That's how I deal with it.
Well said. Yeah, because there is that whole side of the spectrum of things that, like, fear kind of indicates, like, points maybe where it's scary if you take yourself seriously, but it's points in which, like, you do take yourself seriously, that you're thinking about. And so dealing with them, looking at them, allows you to then have the opportunity and not take yourself so seriously. So it's always indicative of things. And so there's almost an appreciation for it, because it shows you stuff. Like it's little, if you're playing a video game, it's like little points where it's like, hey, here's something. It's like challenge points or something in a game as you're going around through different things. Like, here's a little side quest or something that is causing you more attention because there's a focus on it. But yeah, to your point, the spectrum, the back and the forth, like, neither ever last forever. So the craving for one of them just doesn't really make much sense, because, like, that's going to end too. But then it brings you back to where you're at. Because if you're afraid right now and you're craving to not be afraid, you're craving an experience that's going to end. It's like, how long is it going to last? And can I just try and hold on to it as long as it's going to last forever? Can I allow that to be maintained forever? And it's like, no, because you're going to be experiencing repercussions as you go. And even even with death being the end of it, it's like you're going to experience plenty of repercussions before then. But like ultimately, that is the case. It's like you got to get let go one way or another, and so might as well let go while you're living, like while there's something you can do, and then that brings into question like with death and like what even is that? Is that not just the idea ending? And so is it? Can I choose that death? Can I voluntarily do that? But then it's like this whole fucking idea, and then you go, oh, well, like, can I never think about myself? And that's not it either. It's always in flux. It's always back and forth. You're not fucking dying as much as you're assuming that you're something that's alive right now. Have you already died? Is this just like we don't know any of that? It's all fucking out there. But that realization, even that like maybe you're dead right now, and it's like what's telling you that you're not? You can't. You're no, I'm not. I'm alive. Like this is what I think it is, and that's so much it. But like when you're not so sure of shit, then it's like all that stuff's on the table, and maybe it doesn't have to be as serious as you thought. So anyway,
Yeah, I find it really
roundabout.
funny because it's kind of like real or unreal. It doesn't mean anything, right? Like when we think about death, what are we talking about? We're talking about the end of our experience of time. That's what we're talking about, the end of our experience of time. And yet we're like, is there something after? Well, no, because the experience of time is of the living. This is what Jesus was saying, God is of the living. And he kind of like gave them shit for even asking. Like, they're like, what happens after death? He's like, God is of the living. Are you not fucking listening? And so what he was saying is that it's kind of a recirculating system. And what I mean is that the afterlife is this. The afterlife is perpetual life in all forms forever. So if you're wondering what you're going to do after this incarnation's finished, you're going to do all the other incarnations and this one forever. See, we actually have the perception that once our perception or our experience of time ends, our character ends. But our character always exists as potential within the timelines. Our character always exists. Every moment from your birth to your death always exists and within potential in the experience of time, which means that as long as there is life, there is Andrew. Right? As long as there is life, there is our listener. And there is always life because life and existence are synonymous. Right? Existence always is, you always are. And so if you're wondering what happens after I die, you're living it, or at least one part of it. And this is why the best thing you can do to honor people who have died is live.
You got any more questions? Because I am all done.
I
But
do.
I can.
I have a quick. Well, actually, I've got two here, which were fired out by Amanda. Thank you, Amanda, for throwing us a bone. Appreciate it. There's a few. One of which I know that we could get into, and it's kind of tricky. But the other one is straight up. What's the difference between a tool and a crutch? And I would say that it comes down to self-honesty. Are you gaining strength, or are you using it to avoid gaining strength?
Yeah, and I think part of it is how long you're using it. Like something that's a tool can turn into a crutch in a lot of ways. So like initially, maybe it was a tool, and then continuing to use that and not just have faith in yourself and be yourself and jump in yourself, it becomes a crutch. It's something that's relied upon. Like for me, for like with meditation, like initially it was a tool. I just realized how much shit was going on in my head all the time. Like it was a way for me to even realize what it meant to relax, or just an opportunity to slow down. So it's absolutely not necessary. It's just a way that I slowed down a little bit. But it got to a point that it became something that was just on my to-do list, and I realized, oh, I'm just sitting down with my eyes closed, and I can live my life, and it's no different if I'm paying attention to my life. And so it very much became a crutch in the sense of like there would be points, and I've mentioned this before, that like later in the day I'd face a situation, I'd be like, I'd think, did I meditate today? And if the answer was no, I like felt worse about it. It's like it's such a funny thing that would be that then I would shift, and then if it was like, oh, I did. Like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm ready for this. It's like, what? What? That doesn't make sense. But if it was a situation where I'm like, oh, I did I meditate today? It could have even been like I forget one way or the other, and then I'm just like, yeah, I think I did. No, I don't think I did, and it could have been the opposite. So, anyway, yeah, tools can definitely become crutches as they're held onto and not just taken for what they are and then let go of.
Well said. Well said. We still got a few minutes left, so why the fuck not? Let's get into this one. Hold on here. I'll get to the right tab as I was posting the details for our tier 2 call. How can I empathize with others and embody compassion without enabling them? I'm going to throw in and just say, by being aware of when you're enabling yourself. I mean, that's really it, is that we are less likely to want to give somebody an answer they don't like when we're avoiding answers we don't like. When we don't see the value in being disappointed and frustrated, we don't see the value in not getting our way. We don't see the value in somebody calling us out on being a braggart, or somebody calling us out on a false sense of superiority, or any of that. So when we do see the value in that, when we were able to take that in with ourselves, I'd say that equilibrium finds us. I think it starts to make more and more sense as you move forward, but I think it always comes down to self-honesty, and that's what changes our relationships with everyone else.
So much of what you talk about or share or any insights you have, like they're all more or less from your experience. Like they have to be, they must be. And as you start, not looking around quite so much, or trying to find insights in books, or just regurgitating things, then there is the necessary self-honesty in order to have empathy for people, because you're willing to see that, like, oh, that's something that I've thought about, done, whatever. It's like this similar with judgment. So like when you're able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, like it's a lot tougher to judge. And so when you're willing to be honest with yourself, it's easier to interact with everyone else, just because you're willing to admit things about yourself. And so it all stems from self-honesty, as much as it's like, oh, the world's this, the world's that, people are like this, people are like that. Like it stems from me. Like I all I know is my experience, and there is the discernment for sure, recognizing as you pay more attention. And so they kind of go hand in hand, but like the recognition, discernment, attention, all that stuff without self-honesty doesn't really play out in the same way, because the attention is not just about everything else. It has to do with you too.
Well said. Absolutely. Isn't it funny? It always just comes back to you. It's the one thing we don't want to look at, but it's the one thing that dictates everything else. It's so funny, right? Like, it's just so amazing. We have a few minutes left, and so I want to make kind of an exciting announcement. We just crossed the 400 episode mark. Dualistic Unity has been around for over 2 years, 400 episodes, 8 retreats. Fuck yeah. And it's kicking off in a great way. I'm really enjoying this experience. I want to thank everybody who's been a part of this, all of your support, the volunteer hours, showing up for groups, telling your friends, listening to the podcast, doing all that shit. It helps in more ways than we could possibly tell you. Because if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't continue to be here. This wouldn't continue to be a part of the conversation, because we would have to go back to doing our own thing. Mind you, I'd find another way to get here, because over 20 years, I wasn't going to give up ever. So just keeping that in mind, and it's largely because of you. Why would I give up on having this conversation when at some point somebody like you is going to come around and want to have that conversation? And if I gave up, it wouldn't be there. Right? And so it was worth it for me. It was worth it for me to go through 20 years of fucking bullshit just to get to this conversation with myself. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited that it's growing. And I'm going to shut the fuck up and pass it over to Andrew to wrap this up. But if you can join us on Patreon after this, please do so. It's a tier 2 call tonight. It's our latest call of the week, 8 p.m. Eastern time, goes for an hour and a half. We'd love to shoot the shit with you. So if you can join us, we'd love to see you there. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Absolutely excited. I know I got like a couple seconds here, but very excited for Patreon. Hop on there, free trial, 1 week free trial, nothing to lose. Give it a shot. They're a blast. And fuck yeah, 400 episodes. Jesus fucking Christ. I don't even remember like any of them. I don't think that's why I'm enjoying the commentary episodes a lot. And what's up next? Episode 3 we're getting into. So yeah,
The one step
that's gonna be a
process.
fun
I'm
one.
fucking stoked for that one because I remember recording that episode and being very happy about it when it was done.
Fuck yeah. Soon enough.
All right, everyone, we're gonna sign off here. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.